Welcome to the deep dive. Pull up a chair, because today we're doing exactly that. We're taking a stack of sources, articles, research, interviews, biographical notes, and we're diving deep into the incredible, complex journey of Curtis 50 Cent Jackson.
That's right. And the material we've got here, it really covers the whole sweep. Everything from his challenging roots in South Jamaica, Queens,
Right
through his seismic rise in music, the expansive business empire he built, his shift into being a major media player, and really where his legacy stands today.
Our mission with this material is pretty clear. We want to extract the essential knowledge, those pivotal moments, and really try to understand the underlying strategic decisions that shaped him.
Yeah.
From a kid on the streets into this multifaceted global figure he is now.
And importantly.
And crucially, we are sticking strictly to what these sources tell us.
Yeah,
nothing else.
Exactly. It's a story that, frankly, is just packed with dramatic turns. You've got this blend of immense hardship, incredible resilience.
An unbelievable resilience.
A very deliberately cultivated, often controversial public persona, and an undeniable, sharp business mind. It makes for a truly compelling deep dive.
All right, let's get straight into it. To understand 50 Cent, you absolutely have to start right at the very beginning, don't you?
You really do. The sources paint a pretty vivid picture of his origins. Curtis James Jackson III, born July 6, 1975, in South Jamaica, Queens. And right away, that location tells you a lot about the environment he was coming into.
Yeah, Queens in the late 70s, early 80s, especially South Jamaica. I mean, the sources describe a tough urban landscape. His early life seems almost defined by that difficulty, that instability.
Exactly. He was raised primarily by his mother, Sabrina Jackson. And the sources highlight a really key detail here. She was reportedly only 15 years old when she gave birth to him.
15? Wow.
Yeah. That fact alone just underscores the challenging circumstances right from the start. And beyond her age, her profession, and that, well, she was a drug dealer. So this meant that from his earliest years, young Curtis was directly exposed to the violence, the unpredictability, the inherent danger of that trade. This wasn't something happening, off in the distance. It was the fabric of his home life.
And then there was this just profound tragedy when he was very young.
At the incredibly young age of 8, his mother died.
Yeah. The sources say in a mysterious or unexplained fire.
Correct. And the material notes there were accounts suggesting her death might have been connected to her deep involvement in the drug trade, maybe stemming from, a drug war or something similar. It adds this layer of violence and consequence to her already precarious life and, obviously, to his.
He's also shared some deeply personal information about her, revealing that she was a lesbian, which, must have given him an early, maybe unique perspective on navigating different societal realities and complexities, even within that already difficult environment.
It absolutely adds another dimension to understanding those formative years. So, after her death, and with his father basically out of the picture, he was taken in and raised by his grandparents.
He talks about adoring his grandmother.
Yes, but the sources also point out that she was reportedly responsible for raising 9 other children at the same time.
9 other kids in one household. That sounds incredibly crowded.
It does. And the material suggests that while it might have been a loving home in many ways, the sheer number of children meant he had a considerable amount of autonomy from a relatively young age.
Right. Less direct supervision.
Exactly. And that autonomy often translated into spending a lot of time, on the streets.
Makes sense.
And that's where those intensely formative experiences really converged. You have the early exposure to the drug trade through his mother, the sudden and violent loss of his mother, the crowded living situation, and then navigating a dangerous neighborhood known for drug trafficking and gang activity.
It wasn't just one thing. It was this accumulation.
Precisely. And the sources emphasize these weren't just, difficult circumstances. They were the crucible that forged his resilience, that instilled that pragmatic, survivalist worldview he's carried throughout his life.
It sounds like a constant state of needing to be aware, to survive, to overcome obstacles just to get by day to day. That must build a specific kind of mental toughness.
It absolutely would. It instilled in him, according to the sources, a powerful work ethic, this need to fend for himself, and this incredible capacity for adaptation, for reading situations, figuring out how to navigate them.
And crucially for his later career.
Yes, crucially, the raw, unfiltered, often harsh nature of these experiences became the bedrock of his artistic identity. It provided a deep well of authentic narrative that would later resonate so powerfully with audiences because it felt utterly real.
He wasn't just telling stories, he was recounting his life, essentially.
Exactly. And he's been incredibly candid about his early involvement in street life. He talks about hustling from as young as age 9, not for big money initially, but just for things kids wanted, like sneakers. He specifically mentioned wanting Air Jordans.
The iconic Jordans, right?
Exactly. And then, disturbingly, the sources say by age 11 or 12, while his grandparents apparently thought he was safely at after-school programs.
He was actually dealing.
He had started dealing narcotics, specifically crack cocaine.
The image of an 11 or 12-year-old dealing crack, and he's talked about bringing guns and drug money to school. It's just a stark, almost unbelievable detail about the reality of his youth.
It is. And the sources note he's spoken about the motivation behind it. Part of it, he said, was driven by not wanting to burden his grandmother, not wanting to ask her for money for things she clearly couldn't afford. It highlights this complicated mix of early self-reliance, an awareness of financial constraints, and, frankly, the dangerous paths available in that environment.
So alongside this deepening involvement in street life, there was another interest developing, something that seems almost counter to it in some ways, but maybe ultimately complementary. Boxing.
Yes, boxing. He developed an interest around age 11. And a significant turning point there, according to the sources, was when a neighbor opened a boxing gym when he was about 14. He started sparring regularly, then fighting at the junior level.
He had that really powerful quote contrasting these two worlds he inhabited then.
He recalled that duality very explicitly. He said, "When I wasn't killing time in school, I was sparring in the gym or selling crack on the strip."
Wow.
That contrast is key, right? Understanding the discipline he was developing alongside the chaos. Boxing, the sources say, instilled in him this intense competitive spirit and really disciplined mindset.
And he directly linked that discipline to his later music career.
Absolutely. He saw the direct parallels. He said, "I was competitive in the ring, and hip-hop is competitive too." I think rappers condition themselves like boxers, so they all kind of feel like they're the champ.
That makes a lot of sense.
That structure, the strategic thinking you need in the ring, that drive to win. It provided a distinct framework for navigating the equally aggressive and, frankly, cutthroat world of hip-hop. It's fascinating how those seemingly disparate worlds intersected and really shaped his whole approach.
So that street hustle, it didn't diminish as he got older.
Far from it. It escalated significantly as he entered his teenage years. By age 15, the sources state he'd acquired his first gun. And by 19, well, he was reportedly a neighborhood drug kingpin.
Kingpin at 19.
Yeah, managing operations that were, by some sources' estimates, earning him something like $150,000 a month.
That's just a staggering amount of money, especially for someone that young. It really underscores the scale of his involvement at that point.
It highlights the level he'd reached within that world. Unsurprisingly, his full immersion in that life meant formal education kind of fell by the wayside. He dropped out of Andrew Jackson High School.
Did he have run-ins with the law before the major arrests?
He did. He had encounters. He was caught with contraband by metal detectors in 10th grade. He said he found it embarrassing, but it was also the moment he told his grandmother point blank, "I sell drugs."
Yeah.
Just laid it out there.
But the truly significant legal entanglements, the ones that really changed things, came shortly after that.
Yes, a series of key arrests when he was 19. The most notable one, according to the sources, was on June 29, 1994. He was arrested for selling 4 vials of cocaine to an undercover officer.
Okay.
And then, just 3 weeks later, his home was raided. Police found heroin, 10 ounces of crack cocaine, and a starting pistol. So facing the weight of these charges, he was sentenced to 3 to 9 years in prison.
Which sounds like a really life-altering sentence, especially for a 19-year-old kid.
It was. But he didn't end up serving the full term in a traditional prison setting. The sources note he attended a shock incarceration boot camp instead for about 6 months.
A boot camp, like military style.
That's the idea. Less about the length of time, maybe, and more about the intensity, the discipline, the environment. And importantly, during that boot camp period, he earned his GED certificate.
Okay, so that's a positive step.
Definitely. The sources also mentioned he has stated he didn't actually use cocaine himself during his time dealing, which is a notable distinction he makes.
That period of incarceration, though, even just 6 months in a boot camp, facing the stark reality of the criminal justice system, it must have been a critical turning point. It forces you to confront where you're headed, right?
It absolutely seemed to be. The sources suggest it provided this kind of forced opportunity for reflection and as he's articulated it, a chance to fundamentally redirect his path. Earning that GED was a tangible step, an investment in a potential future away from the streets.
And it was around this pivotal time, coming out of that experience, that he adopted the moniker 50 Cent.
That's right. And it wasn't just plucked out of the air, was it?
Not at all. It was very intentionally chosen. The name was inspired by Kelvin Martin, a notorious Brooklyn stick-up artist from the 1980s who is also known as 50 Cent.
Right, a figure known for being ruthless and getting his way.
Exactly. Jackson chose the name specifically as, he called it, a metaphor for change. He explained its significance, stating, "It says everything I want it to say. I'm the same kind of person 50 Cent was. I provide for myself by any means."
So it signaled a transformation, yes, but one explicitly rooted in that resilience, that resourcefulness, that willingness to operate outside conventional boundaries he learned on the streets. It's like taking that survivalist code and applying it to a new ambition.
And the sources also point to another profound personal event around this time that really solidified his resolve to leave the drug trade and pursue music more seriously.
Yes, the birth of his son, Marquise Jackson. The responsibility of fatherhood provided this powerful, deeply personal impetus. It gave him a compelling reason, beyond just avoiding prison, to seek a more legitimate, more stable path to provide for his family. That shift in motivation seems absolutely critical in understanding what happened next.
So he's emerged from boot camp. He's got the new name, the GED, this incredibly deep street background, the discipline from boxing, and now this driving motivation of fatherhood. How does he actually start translating that intense lived experience into music?
Well, even while he was deeply involved in the street activities, he was apparently cultivating this passion for music on the side. He started rapping in a friend's basement, just recording his voiceover instrumentals. The almost quintessential raw hip-hop origin story.
Yeah, building the foundation, learning the craft.
Exactly. And his early influences were the giants of New York hip-hop who came before him, Run DMC, Rakim, KRS-One, LL Cool J, MC Shan. He absorbed their styles, their flows, their storytelling.
And the bigger names looming large then, too.
Oh, yeah. And then there's a broader seismic impact of artists like the Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac Shakur. Their raw honesty, their narrative power. It clearly resonated deeply with him. These artists weren't just music. They provided a soundtrack, a template for lyrical storytelling, and a sense of how to command presence as an artist.
And then came a connection, a mentorship, really, that would prove absolutely pivotal in him developing his craft beyond the basement tapes.
A truly crucial moment arrived in 1996. A friend introduced him to the legendary Jam Master Jay of Run DMC.
Wow, Jam Master Jay.
Yeah, Jay was in the process of establishing his own label, JMJ Records, and he took Jackson under his wing. This mentorship was just invaluable. It provided a structure, a kind of formal training Jackson hadn't had before.
What did Jay teach him specifically? What was the core of that mentorship, according to the sources?
The sources really emphasize that Jay taught him the fundamental mechanics of song creation. This wasn't just about writing rhymes. It was learning to count bars, understanding the rhythmic structure of music, how to write effective catchy choruses, how to structure an entire song properly, and the practical steps of actually making a record in a professional setting.
Access to equipment, too, presumably.
Huge. Jay provided him with access to professional recording equipment, a massive step up from basement recordings, and, crucially, his first real opportunities to perform live in front of actual audiences.
And he did release some music under Jay's guidance then, as 50 Cent.
Yes, credited that way. His debut single, The Glow the Hit, came out on JMJ Records in 1997. He also collaborated with the group Onyx on their track React in 1998. Jay even started producing a full-length debut album for him on JMJ Records.
So a debut album was actually in the works quite early on.
It was. But that project ultimately faced challenges. The sources mentioned difficulties with the writing process, production delays, things like that. It was eventually shelved and never officially released by JMJ Records.
A setback, for sure.
Definitely a setback. But the experience, and more importantly, Jay's guidance had already had a significant impact. It put him on the radar.
And that guidance, despite the shelved album, helped him get noticed by the major labels.
Crucially, Jay's mentorship and the buzz Jackson was starting to generate, even with that unreleased material, helped attract the attention of executive producers at Columbia Records. They recognized the raw talent, that distinct voice, the compelling narrative potential he possessed. And in 1999, they signed him to a major label deal.
Okay, so now he's at Columbia. This puts him on track for his official major label debut, which was supposed to be Power of the Dollar.
Exactly. He was recording for that album between roughly 1998 and 2000. It was actually slated for release in July 2000. He was working with some notable artists. Destiny's Child was featured on a track called Thug Love.
Really? Destiny's Child.
Yeah, and Noriega, the Mad Rapper, were also involved. Columbia started releasing singles to build buzz and introduce him to a wider audience. Tracks like How to Rob, Thug Love, and Your Life's on the Line.
How to Rob. Okay, that single is infamous. It definitely got attention, maybe not all positive.
Undeniably.
Yeah.
Released in August 1999, the lyrics were just incredibly audacious for the time. He humorously, or perhaps not so humorously, depending on who you were, detailed how he would rob prominent figures throughout the music industry. Everyone from Puffy and Jay-Z to like Bobby Brown and Kirk Franklin.
No one was safe.
Pretty much. It's not even controversial, and it succeeded wildly in that respect. It was attention-grabbing, provocative, and showcased his willingness to challenge the established order right from the very start.
But there was another track from that unreleased album, Ghetto Quran, that had far more serious and frankly dangerous consequences.
Yes, Ghetto Quran, forgive me. This track, which was from the Power of the Dollar sessions but leaked out in early 2000, went into detail about the activities and even named notorious drug dealers from his South Jamaica neighborhood back in the 1980s.
Naming names?
Yeah, figures like Kenneth Supreme McGriff and members of the infamous Supreme Team were mentioned explicitly.
And this is where the music crossed back over into the life he was supposedly trying to leave behind. The street code.
Precisely. The sources strongly suggest that the content of Ghetto Quran had incredibly serious repercussions. It was widely rumored to be a significant factor, maybe the main factor, in the subsequent attempt on his life. And it led directly to him being blacklisted by much of the industry.
Because it angered powerful figures.
Allegedly, yes.
Yeah.
Very powerful figures. And later on, his rivals, most notably Ja Rule and Irv Gotti of Murder, Inc., seized on the song's content to label him a snitch, which, as you know, is a deeply damaging accusation within hip-hop culture and can have serious real-world consequences.
So this early major label phase, mentored by a legend, signed to Columbia, showing immense promise. But his provocative lyrical approach, particularly with that one track, not only garnered attention, but also created incredibly dangerous enemies. It really set the stage for the almost unbelievable events that followed.
And those events unfolded in just a brutally violent, nearly fatal turn on May 24, 2000. He was ambushed outside his grandmother's former home back in South Jamaica, Queens.
And the sources are clear on the severity. He was shot 9 times.
9 times, at close range,
Yep.
with a 9mm handgun. The incident apparently occurred right after he had gotten into a friend's car. He was asked to pop back into the house briefly to get some jewelry he'd forgotten. His son was inside the house at the time, and his grandmother was reportedly in the front yard.
Just a normal moment turning horrific.
Exactly. As he was returning to the backseat of the car, another vehicle pulled up alongside, and an assailant just opened fire.
The physical impact of being hit 9 times, it must have been devastating.
The sources detail the bullet wounds. He was struck in the hand, arm, hip, both legs, chest, and critically in his left cheek. That facial wound was particularly severe. It resulted in a swollen tongue, the loss of a wisdom tooth, and, as a permanent consequence, that slightly slurred quality to his voice.
Which, remarkably, almost became a signature part of his rapping style later on.
Absolutely, a unique identifier. His friend was also wounded in the hand during the attack. Jackson was rushed to the hospital where he spent 13 days recovering.
And the alleged shooter.
A man identified in the sources as Daryl Homicide Bomb, who was reportedly a friend and sometimes bodyguard of boxer Mike Tyson. He was himself killed just 3 weeks after the attack on Jackson.
He reflected on this near-death experience quite profoundly later, didn't he?
He did. In his autobiography, From Pieces to Weight, he wrote, and this is a powerful quote, "After I got shot 9 times at close range and didn't die, I started to think that I must have a purpose in life. How much more damage could that shell have done? Give me an inch in this direction or that one, and I'm gone."
That really speaks to the transformative nature of the event for him. It wasn't just physical recovery. It sounds like a psychological and maybe even existential shift.
It absolutely was. He used a walker for 6 weeks, took about 5 months to fully recover physically.
Yeah.
But the near-death experience was far more than just a physical ordeal. It was his crucible that fundamentally transformed his outlook on life, his artistic approach, and certainly his public persona. Those 9 bullets didn't signify an ending for him. They became the cornerstone of this almost mythic rebirth narrative.
Yeah, it solidified his image as almost invincible, right? A
Yeah.
figure who had literally cheated death.
Exactly. And that narrative of survival became absolutely central to his music. It was woven directly into tracks, most famously, Many Men Wish Death, where he explicitly addresses the attempts on his life and the people who wished him harm.
It became this undeniable, authentic testament to the get rich or die tryin' philosophy he would later embody so fully.
Precisely. The shooting lent this unparalleled authenticity and weight to his street narratives. It made his stories feel intensely real and consequential to listeners. And that slightly slurred voice, as we mentioned, rather than being a limitation, became this unique vocal signature, instantly recognizable and seemingly imbued with the gravity of his experience.
It's incredible how he took a catastrophic event and reframed it, integrated it into his brand, making it something that built his legend and propelled him forward.
It really provided this almost mythic foundation for the superstardom that followed. It's a powerful example of his ability to take a devastating experience and strategically integrate it into his brand narrative. However, in the immediate aftermath, there was severe professional fallout from the shooting and the ongoing Ghetto Koran controversy.
Columbia Records dropped him, right?
So,
Cut ties.
Swiftly. They canceled the planned release of Power of the Dollar and terminated his contract. He was effectively blacklisted by much of the mainstream recording industry in the United States.
Was the blacklisting solely because of the Ghetto Koran song?
The sources primarily attribute it to the lyrical content of that song and the powerful figures it allegedly angered, specifically naming Kenneth Supreme McGriff. The situation was serious enough that law enforcement even investigated whether the shooting was direct retaliation for those lyrics.
Wow.
And they also looked into whether Jam Master Jay's later murder, tragically, was connected to him ignoring the industry's blacklisting of 50 Cent and continuing to work with him. That just shows the level of danger and influence potentially involved.
So facing closed doors in the U.S., he had to pivot. He had to find another way to keep making music.
Exactly. Unable to find studio access in the U.S. due to this blacklisting, he turned to Canada. With his business partner at the time, Shaw Money XL, he began recording music independently up there. This industry rejection forced a fundamental strategic pivot.
He bypassed the traditional gatekeepers.
Entirely. He focused on independent production and, crucially, the distribution of prolific mixtapes.
This seems like it was absolutely key to building that organic, ground-up fan base.
Absolutely instrumental. It allowed him to connect directly with the underground audience, building buzz from the streets up. Mixtapes like 50 Cent is the Future, where he famously rapped over popular beats from established artists like Jay-Z and Raphael Saadiq, as well as No Mercy, No Fear, and God's Plan, circulated widely. They were crucial in building a massive grassroots following without relying on traditional radio or MTV.
That strategy of taking other artists' popular beats and flipping them.
It was noted as brilliant by people in the industry later. Mark LaBelle of Shady Records, who was involved in signing him eventually, specifically mentioned this strategy. He said he took all the hottest beats from every artist and flipped them with better hooks. They then got into all the markets of the mixtapes, and all the mixtape DJs were messing with them. It was just a direct, incredibly effective way to gain exposure and demonstrate his skills on familiar territory.
And that intense mixtape activity culminated in a particularly successful independent release, didn't it?
The official mixtape, Guess Who's Back, which came out in May 2002 on Full Clip Records. It was recorded in Canada and notably featured some tracks originally intended for the shelved Power of the Dollar, including Your Life's on the Line and even, controversially, Ghetto Koran.
And this mixtape, despite being totally independent, performed incredibly well on the charts.
It achieved considerable underground success, managing to peak at number 28 on the Billboard 200 chart. That's remarkable for a mixtape at that time. Sources reported it sold around 800,000 copies through Landspeed Records, which was a distributor specializing in independent and underground releases.
So this innovative mixtape strategy, which was basically born purely out of necessity because he was blacklisted,
Right.
it proved his market value in a really tangible way. Established industry players couldn't ignore that kind of performance.
Exactly. It was a pioneering example of leveraging unofficial channels to build both a formidable fan base and significant industry leverage. He proved he could move units on his own.
And during this intense period of mixtape creation and distribution, he was also formalizing his crew, G-Unit.
Yes, G-Unit. He solidified the crew with childhood friends from South Jamaica, Lloyd Banks and Tony Ayo. They started rapping together and recording independently right after he was dropped by Columbia. Those early mixtapes, like 50 Cent Is the Future, prominently featured G-Unit tracks and the other artists.
And G-Unit felt like more than just collaborators. It seemed like a unit forged in those shared experiences back in Queens.
The sources suggest it was very much a direct extension of the street mentality, built on loyalty, shared hardship, a sense of brotherhood translated directly into the music world. That authentic camaraderie resonated deeply with audiences and became a significant part of the G-Unit brand itself. It showcased his ability to translate those personal relationships and the structures he knew from the street into a marketable musical entity, proving he could build something beyond just himself.
So he'd built this undeniable buzz. He'd proven his talent and his marketability through the mixtape circuit, despite being effectively blacklisted. And he had this powerful, almost mythic narrative of survival after the shooting. How did all of that grassroots momentum finally break through to the absolute mainstream?
It sounds almost like fate, the way the sources describe it. That relentless hustle and the undeniable buzz from the mixtapes, particularly Guess Who's Back, eventually just broke through that industry blacklisting. In 2002, a copy of Guess Who's Back found its way to Eminem.
How did that happen?
Apparently through 50 Cent's attorney, who happened to be working with Eminem's manager, Paul Rosenberg. Just the right connection at the right time.
And Eminem's reaction was immediate.
Eminem was reportedly profoundly impressed. Blown away, basically. He took the mixtape and played it for Dr. Dre. And according to the sources, both of these hip-hop icons were just floored by 50 Cent's talent, his raw energy, and the compelling authenticity of his narratives.
Getting the endorsement of both Eminem and Dr. Dre, I mean, that's about as significant a cosign as you can possibly get in that world, right?
It's the ultimate validation. And it led directly to the pivotal moment, a reported $1 million record deal. He signed jointly to Eminem's Shady Records and Dr. Dre's Aftermath Entertainment, with both labels operating under the big umbrella of Interscope Records.
This alliance was absolutely crucial, wasn't it? More than just a record deal.
It was the crucial gateway to mainstream global superstardom. While 50 Cent clearly had the street credibility, the self-made buzz, and the compelling story. The explicit backing, the unparalleled production prowess, and the established global reputations of Eminem and Dr. Dre provided an endorsement that money simply couldn't buy. It immediately signaled his importance and legitimacy to the entire industry and the wider public.
And that backing ensured he had the best possible platform, the best resources for his major label debut this time around.
Absolutely. It ensured high-quality music with iconic production from Dre and M. It opened doors to much wider demographics than the mixtape world could reach. It guaranteed extensive radio play, prime placement in retail stores, and just the kind of full-spectrum industry support that had been actively denied to him previously.
And that debut album was, of course, Get Rich or Die Tryin'. Released February 2003, executive produced by Dr. Dre and Eminem.
And phenomenon is really the only word for its commercial success. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 chart, selling an absolutely astounding 872,000 copies in its first week alone.
Just massive numbers.
Unbelievable. Sources vary slightly on its exact certifications over time, but it was certified either 9X or 6X platinum by the RIAA, with total U.S. sales reportedly exceeding 10 million copies eventually. It was, hands down, the best-selling album of 2003 in the United States.
And the singles from that album were just inescapable that year.
They completely dominated. India Club was the lead single and became an instant cultural phenomenon. It topped the Billboard Hot 100 for 9 straight weeks. It was the anthem everywhere.
You couldn't go anywhere without hearing it.
Exactly. Then, 21 Questions, featuring Nate Dogg, also hit #1 on the Hot 100. And that one was notable because it showcased a softer, more romantic side that maybe people didn't expect. And PIMP was a massive international hit, reaching the top 3 in the U.S. and hitting #1 in several countries globally.
Beyond the massive commercial success, the album was generally well received by critics, too, wasn't it?
Generally favorable reviews, yes. It received a prestigious Grammy nomination for Best Rap Album, and it won Favorite Rap Hip Hop Album at the 2003 American Music Awards. So it wasn't just selling, it was being critically acknowledged as a significant release.
The lyrical content on Get Rich or Die Tryin' really doubled down on his life story, didn't it? It felt intensely personal.
Entirely. It was anchored completely in his lived experiences, the realities of gangster life, the necessity of survival, that relentless drive for ambition. Tracks like Many Men Wish Death directly reference the shooting and the people who wanted him dead. Back Down was a notable aggressive diss track directly aimed at his rival Ja Rule.
He wasn't shying away from the conflict.
Not at all. He acknowledged in interviews a need to maybe limit overt vulnerability in his lyrics, balancing it with aggressive deliveries and themes of toughness. But the experiences were right there.
And the sources note even Dr. Dre was a bit hesitant about including 21 questions on such a hard album.
He was, reportedly. Dre questioned including what was essentially a love song on what was being framed as this gritty gangsta album. But 50 Cent apparently insisted, explaining the necessity of showing a more multifaceted persona, that he wasn't just one note.
Smart move, probably broadened the appeal.
Likely did. And the album title itself, Get Rich or Die Tryin', became more than just an album title. It became this cultural catchphrase, a mantra that encapsulated his ethos of relentless ambition and survival in the face of overwhelming odds. It tapped into this powerful, almost universal narrative of overcoming adversity and resonated deeply with audiences worldwide.
Following up a debut that massive is incredibly difficult for any artist, his second album was The Massacre. How did that perform?
Sure. It absolutely continued his commercial dominance, almost defying the odds. Released in March 2005, it sold over 1 million copies in its first 4 days alone.
1 million in 4 days.
Yeah, and 1.15 million in its first week. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 and held that top spot for 6 consecutive weeks. It was eventually certified 6X Platinum in the U.S. and sold over 10 million copies worldwide. It ended up being the #1 album of 2005 on the Billboard 200 charts.
The stats are just consistently incredible for those first 2 albums.
They really are. And The Massacre achieved a remarkable feat. It had 3 singles, Candy Shop, Disco Inferno, and How We Do, which featured the game simultaneously in the Billboard Top 5. That's just chart dominance.
What about the content and style compared to the debut?
Lyrically, the album revisited many of the gangster themes, though some critics noted it perhaps featured more prominent sexism compared to his debut. Musically, it built on the polished, high-end production of Get Rich or Die Tryin', but also incorporated some new elements, including hints of jazz rap influences, more R&B hooks, and even Middle Eastern melodies, particularly in tracks produced by Scott Storch.
Reviews were generally positive again, but maybe a bit more mixed than for the debut.
That's a fair assessment, based on the sources. Still positive overall, but some critics maybe noted a sense of trying to replicate the first album's formula. It still earned him another Grammy nomination for Best Rap Album, though, showing continued industry recognition at the highest level.
His third album under that shady Aftermath deal was Curtis,
Released in September 2007. Now, while this was still commercially successful by almost any normal standard, selling around 3.5 million globally and about 1.3 million in the U.S., it definitely marked a noticeable decline in sales compared to the previous 2 absolute blockbusters.
A slight cooling off, perhaps?
Perhaps. Reviews were also more mixed this time around. Some critics found parts of it repetitive or felt the production sounded a bit dated compared to the trends at the time, while others praised his lyricism and the thematic variety he attempted on some tracks. It did feature the huge hit single I.O. Technology with Justin Timberlake and Timbaland, which was a major international success.
What was his stated goal with Curtis?
He stated that with Curtis, he aimed to kind of return to the themes and the feeling of his life before he achieved mainstream fame. I'll look back, maybe.
So across this era, that absolute peak of musical dominance, how would you characterize his evolving musical style based on the sources?
The sources consistently point to several key things. That distinctive rolling drawl in his delivery, an aggressive flow that felt very direct and confrontational, and a core commitment to gritty realism in his lyrical content.
Always rooted in experience.
Always. His lyrics drew constantly from his street experiences, themes of survival, financial ambition, unapologetic self-assertion. He used metaphors rooted in that world and delivered direct challenges to rivals or societal norms. This music, characterized by that high-budget, polished production backing his raw street narratives, significantly shaped hip-hop in the early 2000s and really spearheaded a resurgence of gangsta rap in the mainstream consciousness.
And through all of this immense success, that foundational relationship with Eminem and Dr. Dre remained a constant.
It did. The sources show they forged this enduring bond. Dre and Eminem weren't just label heads. They provided crucial production, featured on his biggest tracks, and offered mentorship. He consistently acknowledged their guidance and support as absolutely fundamental to his success. They were often referred to as a legendary trio who, for that period, just completely dominated the charts and represented this incredibly powerful, influential alliance in music.
But the sources do note that with Curtis, and then even more so with subsequent albums like Before I Self-Destruct and Animal Ambition, there's a hint of a shifting landscape in his music career's trajectory.
Yeah, the diminishing returns compared to Get Rich or Die Tryin and The Massacre, and the noticeably weaker sales for those later albums suggested a few factors were likely at play. It's incredibly difficult for any artist to maintain that kind of peak cultural and commercial momentum indefinitely.
True.
Shifting audience tastes were definitely a factor. You had artists like Kanye West rising with a very different sound and thematic focus. And perhaps there was just some market saturation with his specific style after a few years of dominance. This trajectory, the sources suggest, likely accelerated his strategic diversification beyond music. He seemed to recognize that music alone, while still a source of income and influence, might not be sufficient to sustain the empire at its absolute zenith long term.
That makes sense. We have a table here summarizing those peak album years. Get Rich or Die Tryin, released 2003, hit #1 Billboard 200, massive U.S. sales, 9x or 6x platinum. Sources differ slightly, but over 10M total reported Grammy nominated, won an AMA. The Massacre, 2005, also #1 6x platinum in the U.S., Grammy nominated again. And Curtis, 2007, peaked at #2, was platinum in the U.S., and while sales were lower, it still garnered awards like Best-Selling Hip-Hop Artist at the World Music Awards in 2007. The table clearly shows that early explosive dominance followed by the beginning of a gradual but noticeable shift.
So even as his music career was hitting those incredible global peaks, there was this clear indication of his ambition extending far beyond just rapping. He demonstrated a really keen entrepreneurial spirit from early on, almost in parallel with his musical rise.
Yeah, it wasn't an afterthought. It seemed like part of the plan right from the start.
The sources show it was very strategic brand extension. He leveraged his powerful name and persona from the music world and began diversifying into other business ventures relatively early in his mainstream career. And that expansion has just continued relentlessly, solidifying his status as a multifaceted mogul, not just a musician anymore.
And G-Unit, the crew, naturally became G-Unit Records.
Right. Founded officially in 2003, G-Unit Records became the official label home for himself and his G-Unit crew members right after he signed that major Shady Aftermath deal. Shaw Money XL, his early collaborator and business partner, served as the label president until about 2007.
The initial roster was built on that core loyalty, featuring the crew he came up with.
Absolutely. Lloyd Banks, Tony Ayo, and later Young Buck, the childhood friends and early collaborators who had been with him through the whole mixtape era. They did expand the roster later to include artists like The Game, although that relationship was brief and notoriously controversial.
Very controversial.
Olivia, the legendary Mobb Deep, and even Maze for a period. G-Unit Records quickly became a real force to be reckoned with in hip-hop, releasing hugely successful albums, including the G-Unit group album Beg for Mercy, which sold millions, and solo projects from the core members that also did very well commercially.
But the sources mention the complexity, maybe the difficulty of translating his individual global superstardom into sustained success for every single artist on his label.
That's where the challenges definitely arose. While 50 Cent was this massive global icon, the artists signed to his label had varying degrees of sustained commercial success over the long term. And this did lead to public friction over the years. Some former G-Unit artists openly blamed their career shortcomings on his management style or on the perception that his dominant brand overshadowed their own development.
And his response to that kind of criticism?
He has been quoted basically saying he provided the opportunities, he gave them the platform, but ultimately he couldn't make people buy records. It really highlights the inherent difficulties in artist-led labels, doesn't it? The founder's massive brand can sometimes cast too large a shadow, and managing multiple creative egos under one dominant vision is always a complex undertaking.
Beyond the music label, he ventured into apparel quite early on, too.
The G-Unit Clothing Company. Also founded in 2003, it was a partnership with Mark Ecko, the founder of Ecko on LT, which was a very prominent urban fashion brand at the time. What was notable here, according to the sources, is that 50 Cent apparently maintained full ownership of the clothing line itself, while Ecko's company handled the marketing and merchandising aspects.
And was it successful commercially?
Very. The sources report it generated over $100 million in retail sales at its peak. The initial partnership with Ecko ended at one point but was later reestablished, and the clothing line continued, with plans for new collections mentioned even as late as 2009. As of 2019, the sources indicate it primarily operates as an online retail venture, still leveraging that G-Unit brand recognition.
But if there's one business move that's truly legendary, the one that's always cited as a turning point and a sign of his business savvy, It's the vitamin water deal.
Oh, absolutely. The partnership with Glaso, the parent company of Vitamin Water, back in 2004. This is often held up as just a masterclass in celebrity business deals. Instead of simply taking a standard one-time endorsement fee to promote the drink, which was typical then,
He negotiated for equity.
he astutely negotiated for an equity stake in the company itself. The sources report he secured roughly a 10% ownership stake. He also launched his own signature grape-flavored vitamin water called Formula 50.
And this decision, taking equity instead of a fee, proved to be incredibly, almost unbelievably lucrative down the line.
Immensely. The decision to take equity paid off spectacularly when Coca-Cola acquired Glaso in 2007 for a staggering $4.1 billion. Jackson's payout from his stake was substantial. Estimates vary a bit in the sources, ranging from a more conservative $60–100 million up to widely reported figures between $100 million and even $400 million.
Wow, that's a huge range, but even the low end is life-changing.
Absolutely transformative. That windfall, the sources emphasize, fundamentally changed his financial future and provided the capital and probably the confidence to inspire further diversification into even more complex ventures.
It wasn't just a smart deal for him, it really shifted the paradigm for how celebrities approached corporate partnerships after that, didn't it?
It absolutely did. It demonstrated the sophisticated understanding of long-term wealth creation, prioritizing ownership and potential upside over a quick endorsement check. It became this legendary business move that influenced how many other celebrities and artists structured their deals going forward. It solidified his image as a shrewd businessman with significant foresight, not just, product pitchman.
He also ventured into the tech world with headphones.
In 2011, yes, he founded SMS Audio, a consumer electronics company focused primarily on headphones. He acquired a smaller company called Kano Audio to kickstart it, and its president, Brian Nohey, became the president of SMS Audio. They aimed for the premium audio market with lines like Street by 50, featuring wireless headphones utilizing clear wireless technology and various collaborations.
Did they have any notable partnerships or innovative products?
They did. They had partnerships with figures like DJ Pauly D, Timbaland came in as an investor, and NBA star Carmelo Anthony was involved. They released Star Wars-themed headphones through a collaboration with Lucasfilm, which got some attention. And they also developed the BioSport in-ear wired earbuds in partnership with Intel, which actually incorporated biometric sensor technology, tracking heart rate and things like that. Despite these innovations and partnerships, however, the company's website apparently went down in 2016, and operations were reportedly suspended, although some products were still listed on the G-Unit brand site as late as 2022. He had expressed ambitions to expand SMS Audio into home entertainment systems as well, but that didn't seem to materialize.
More recently, he's built a significant presence in the beverage alcohol market, moving into spirits.
Sire Spirits. Yes, by the 2020s, he was deeply involved in this sector, focusing specifically on premium spirits. His most notable brands are Branson Cognac and Le Chemin du Roi Champagne.
Aiming high end.
Definitely. The branding for these products consistently emphasizes high quality, craftsmanship, and luxury, clearly targeting a higher-end market segment. And the sources show he is actively and aggressively defending this business. They highlight a recent legal action in 2025 where Sire Spirits gained court approval to seize assets from a former executive who had apparently defrauded the company. It demonstrates a real willingness to pursue legal avenues to protect his business interests in this very competitive sector.
He also became a best-selling author, sharing his strategic insights.
Co-authoring The 50th Law with the acclaimed author Robert Greene, famous for The 48 Laws of Power back in 2009. This book was quite unique because it blended Jackson's raw life experiences and street wisdom, the lessons learned from survival and navigating dangerous environments, with Greene's more philosophical lessons on fearlessness, strategy, and achieving success. It wasn't just a celebrity memoir, it was framed as this guide to power and resilience.
And it performed well, both commercially and critically.
Yes, it debuted at number 5 on the New York Times bestseller list and was also a USA Today bestseller. It received significant critical acclaim, with reviewers often comparing its strategic insights to classic texts like Sun Tzu's The Art of War. He promoted the book extensively, really leveraging his profile to position himself as a source of strategic wisdom, not just entertainment.
And let's not forget the video games. He even ventured into that industry, using his persona as the basis.
Twice, actually. First was 50 Cent Bulletproof, released in 2005 for PS2, Xbox, and PSP. The game starred 50 Cent seeking vengeance and featured appearances from other G-Unit members, Dr. Dre and Eminem. Its soundtrack even won an award for Best Original Song at the 2005 Spike TV Video Game Awards. Reviews for the actual gameplay were kind of mixed, but critics often praised the story and the music integration. And commercially, it was successful, selling over 1.1 million units.
But the sequel didn't fare as well.
No, 50 Cent Blood on the Sand, which came out in 2009 for PS3 and Xbox 360. This sequel generally received more positive reviews for its improved gameplay compared to its predecessor. However, despite the bitter reviews, it was a significant commercial failure. The sources say it sold only about 56,000 units in the US, which just wasn't nearly enough to warrant any further installments in a game series.
So looking across this incredibly diverse array of ventures, music, clothing, beverages, electronics, books, games, what's the overarching strategy? How does it all connect, or does it?
There's a very clear, consistent pattern when you look at the sources. Across all these ventures, he has consistently and strategically leveraged his powerful personal brand, that image of street-smart resilience, toughness, and ultimate entrepreneurial success to penetrate varied markets. These weren't just random attempts, they were deliberate extensions of the 50 Cent brand itself. That persona provided the initial market awareness, the credibility for each new product line or company.
He really exemplifies that modern celebrity entrepreneur model.
Absolutely. Viewing your name, your story, your influence, not just as a source of income from endorsements, but as a versatile platform to create multiple revenue streams and build lasting enterprises, moving far beyond the traditional boundaries of just being an entertainer.
We have a table summarizing these major business ventures again. G-Unit Records, founded 2003, music sector, still exists, but the primary focus has clearly shifted. G-Unit Clothing, 2003 apparel, generated significant sales, $100 plus reported, now mainly online. The Glace of Vitamin Water Partnership, 2004 beverage sector, resulted in that massive estimated payout, potentially $400. SMS Audio, 2011 electronics operations reportedly suspended. Sire Spirits, active by the 2020s. Beverage alcohol, currently active and being legally defended. The 50th Law, published 2009. Literature, a NYT bestseller. And the video games, 2005 and 2009. Entertainment, with Bulletproof selling well, but Blood on the Sand being a commercial failure. And of course, the next big chapter, G-Unit Film and Television.
Exactly. Building on that substantial financial and brand capital accumulating to the music and those early business ventures, he made a very deliberate and very strategic pivot towards film and television production.
Moving from just appearing on screen occasionally to really controlling what happens behind the camera, a power shift.
Precisely. Becoming a formidable media mogul in his own right. His company, G-Unit Film and Television, Inc., actually had origins as G-Unit Films way back in 2003, focusing more on documentaries then. But it was revived and significantly rebranded around 2010, specifically for this expansion into scripted content. His strategy evolved dramatically. He wasn't just acting anymore. He was actively pitching, developing, and producing a wide range of scripted dramas, comedies, and even animated series across various networks and streaming platforms.
And the absolute cornerstone of this entire media empire has undoubtedly been the Power universe on the Starz network.
Unquestionably. He served as co-creator, an executive producer, and also appeared as a major co-star, playing the character Kanan Stark on the original Power series, which ran from 2014 to 2020. The show became an absolute ratings juggernaut for Starz. It wasn't just a hit, it grew into a major cultural touchstone, particularly resonating deeply with Black audiences.
That success really feels like a strategic masterstroke, identifying and tapping into an audience that maybe felt overlooked by other networks or shows.
It really was brilliant. He successfully leveraged his existing massive fan base, his deep street credibility, and his innate storytelling ability to create this narrative universe that felt incredibly authentic and resonated deeply with its target demographic. The massive success of the original show led directly to a highly lucrative, multi-year overall production deal with Starz, reportedly worth somewhere around $150 million.
Wow. And it didn't stop with the original show. He immediately started building a whole franchise around it.
A highly successful and rapidly expanding one. The Power universe has spawned multiple spin-offs that have also performed very well. Power Book 2 Ghost, which followed characters after the original show ended. Power Book 3 Raising Kanan, a prequel focusing on the youth of his own character. And Power Book 4 Force, following another popular character who relocated.
It demonstrates a really keen understanding of intellectual property development and how to build and expand a valuable franchise in the modern television landscape.
Absolutely. He proved that a figure from hip-hop could not only act, but could become a major player, a power broker in scripted television production. He created a blueprint, really, by identifying and effectively catering to an underserved market with narratives that felt authentic to them.
And G-Unit Film and Television has produced other notable projects beyond just the Power universe, right?
Yes, definitely. He's an executive producer on the critically acclaimed series BMF, which stands for Black Mafia Family, also for Starz, which started in 2021 and has been very successful. There's also the BMF documentary, Blowing Money Fast, a companion docuseries also on Starz that he executive produced and which has been renewed for a second season.
So he's doing scripted and unscripted.
Exactly. His production credits extend to other networks and platforms too, including For Life on ABC, which he also acted in, 50 Central, a sketch comedy show on BET, The Oath on Sony Crackle, and Hip Hop Homicides on WETV. It's a deep and varied production slate across different genres and outlets.
He's continued his involvement in film as well, not just limiting himself to television.
Acting roles, certainly, but increasingly producing roles, too. He had a significant role in the heist movie Den of Thieves back in 2018 and is involved in the upcoming sequel, Den of Thieves 2, Pantera, scheduled for 2025, likely with a producing credit as well as acting. He's also appeared in larger franchise films like Expendables.
It's a significant evolution from his early acting roles, like starring in the semi-autobiographical Get Rich or Die Tryin film back in 2005.
Absolutely. He's transitioned into this multi-platform content creator who isn't just in front of the camera, but is actively executive producing, directing, and writing. It shows a clear and deliberate ambition to control the narratives and the production process from the ground up.
And a really striking, almost unexpected development in this media empire is his significant investment in physical production infrastructure down in Shreveport, Louisiana. This feels different from just producing shows in LA or New York.
This is a major, almost unprecedented move for someone with his background and profile. In 2023, his company, G-Unit Film and Television, acquired control of a massive 985,000 square foot studio facility in Shreveport. It used to be known as Millennium Studios, and he got it via a lease agreement with the city.
And it's a huge facility.
Huge. It's been widely touted as set to become the second largest Black-owned studio facility in the country, second only to Tyler Perry Studios down in Atlanta. It's intended for film, television, and broader arts production.
But he's really doubled down on Shreveport just recently, according to the sources. He didn't stop with the studio.
He has. There was a further commitment made in March 2025. He secured a 30-year lease, with an option to extend it to 45 years, for Shreveport's historic Stageworks building. And the terms mentioned in the sources are quite striking. A remarkably low rent of just $200 a month, plus operational costs.
$200 a month for a major venue.
Seems incredibly low, right? This Stageworks venue is apparently planned to host a wide variety of live events. MMA fights, boxing matches, basketball games, concerts, conventions. It's a multi-purpose space.
He's referred to these Shreveport ventures as a legacy project. That phrasing gives it a different kind of weight, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. He's not just acquiring business assets. He's framing it as something much bigger, much more long-term. He's promised publicly to over-deliver for the city of Shreveport. This indicates plans that extend beyond just entertainment production, hinting at involvement in community revitalization, potentially including housing projects, aligning his business interests directly with tangible local impact.
It's a strategic decentralization, too, moving away from the traditional hubs.
Exactly, away from New York and Los Angeles. What are the potential benefits or implications of a move like that? Well, the sources suggest several. There are likely potential cost advantages compared to major coastal production centers. There's the opportunity for greater creative control by owning and operating the infrastructure directly.
And the community aspect.
And critically, there's the significant opportunity to build a lasting legacy through direct community engagement, job creation, and urban development in a city where he can be a truly central, transformative figure. It positions Jackson as a major force in Shreveport's economic and cultural development, letting him wield significant influence in what you might call a smaller pond compared to the saturated markets of LA or NYC. It could potentially serve as a model for other wealthy entertainers looking to make a tangible impact beyond just charity.
And beyond the Starz deal and the major Shreveport investment, he's continuing to expand his production reach through other partnerships.
Yes, he signed a non-exclusive broadcast direct deal with Fox. That's to develop scripted dramas, comedies, and animated series, specifically through his G-Unit Film and Television banner. This gives him another major outlet for his growing production slate.
And notably, the sources report he's actively producing a Netflix docuseries.
Yes. One that chronicles the alleged crimes and dramatic legal downfall of Sean Diddy Combs. This is obviously a topic that has generated massive public interest, and it's one that Jackson himself has been incredibly vocal, even relentless, about on social media.
We have that table of key productions again, highlighting the sheer scale of this media empire now. The Power universe, encompassing the original Power series and all the spin-offs. Ghost, Raising Kanan, Force All on Stars, where he's executive producer and sometimes actor. The BMF scripted series and its companion documentary, also on Stars, where he's an EP. For Life on ABC, where he was an EP and had an acting role. 50 Central on BT, EP and performer. The Oath on Sony Crackle, an EP credit. Hip Hop Homicides on WETV, another EP role. And films like Den of Thieves, acting and EP on the sequel, plus that highly anticipated untitled Sean Combs docuseries for Netflix, where he's listed as a producer. It's just a deep, wide-ranging slate that clearly demonstrates his transformation into a genuine media powerhouse.
Now, throughout this entire journey, alongside the music and the business ventures, there's the man himself, Curtis Jackson, and his very deliberate, often highly controversial public persona.
Yeah, he's cultivated an image that is consistently presented as streetwise and confrontational. That seems to be absolutely a core part of the 50 Cent brand, forged way back in his early life and consciously amplified throughout his career in music and media.
It is absolutely central to understanding him. And a significant, perhaps even defining aspect of that persona is his involvement in numerous, very high-profile feuds with other figures in the entertainment industry. These conflicts, often played out incredibly publicly through music, the diss tracks, and increasingly, especially in recent years through social media, have consistently kept him in the headlines and made him a constant topic of discussion.
The feud with Ja Rule is just legendary in hip-hop history. It defined an era, almost.
It is the longest-running and arguably the most infamous. It reportedly began way back around 1999 over various incidents, including an alleged robbery and claims of disrespect. It escalated dramatically in the early 2000s into this full-blown rap war, leading to a barrage of diss tracks from both sides.
A lot of people got pulled into that one.
A wide range of artists got involved. Major figures like Eminem, Dr. Dre, DMX, and Busta Rhymes famously aligned themselves with 50 Cent against Ja Rule and his label at the time, Murder, Inc. There were even alleged physical altercations between the entourages.
It became almost a caricature of a rap beef at times, the scale of it.
It really reached that level of intensity and public spectacle. Now, while Ja Rule declared the feud over back in 2011, stating they weren't collaborating but weren't actively beefing anymore, the sources indicate that underlying tensions have occasionally resurfaced, sometimes even triggered by comments or events much later, such as following the death of Irv Gotti, the head of Murder, Inc. in 2025, according to the material we have. The embers still glow, it seems.
Then there's the high-profile and very messy fallout with The Game.
Yeah, that conflict ignited around 2004-2005. The Game had been brought into G Unit by Dre and 50, and he was heavily promoted as part of the crew. However, 50 Cent reportedly perceived The Game as being disloyal for not fully taking his side in his ongoing beefs with other artists.
Loyalty is clearly paramount in his world.
It seems so. This led to that infamous public dismissal of The Game from G Unit, which happened live on the radio. Just incredibly dramatic. And that incident was immediately followed by a shooting outside the radio station between members of their respective entourages. That feud remains largely unresolved, with sporadic insults and shots exchanged over the years via interviews and social media.
The Rick Ross feud is another one that's played out very publicly and often with really personal attacks.
It reportedly originated from just a verbal exchange at a Beat Awards event back in 2008. But this feud saw 50 Cent employ particularly personal and frankly quite controversial tactics. This included publicly dating the mother of Rick Ross's child and even publishing a tell-all book about her.
That feels like crossing a line for many.
It was definitely seen that way by some. He also repeatedly mocked Ross's health issues and the sales figures of his albums. And the sources note that as recently as early 2025, Rick Ross retaliated with an intense social media rant, making disparaging comments about 50 Cent's mother and specifically mocking his G Unit Studios venture, notably mentioning a location in LA, even though, as we've discussed, other sources detail his significant investments are primarily in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Yeah, that location detail discrepancy is interesting, showing how narratives can get twisted in these public spats.
It really is. And it just highlights the nature of these public feuds, often fueled by personal attacks and potentially inaccurate information shared in the heat of the moment or for effect.
He even had a major, very public falling out with someone he was once extremely close to, Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, they were once very close friends and business partners. They even started a boxing promotion company together, TMT Promotions. But their relationship soured dramatically around 2012.
What was the reported cause?
The sources suggest it was allegedly over unpaid money that Jackson claimed Mayweather owed him for managing the promotion company, while Mayweather was serving a prison sentence. The feud quickly escalated into highly public insults, including 50 Cent famously mocking Mayweather's reading ability during the viral Ice Bucket Challenge trend, which was a particularly biting and personal attack that went viral.
Did they ever fully reconcile after something like that?
50 Cent later stated publicly that the feud had ended, but he also indicated that the close friendship they once shared was definitely not rekindled. And the sources note that he has recently continued to troll Mayweather on social media regarding a lawsuit, suggesting either lingering tension or simply a willingness to use their shared history for public attention when it suits him.
And it wasn't just external feuds. He's had very public disagreements with former G-Unit members like Lloyd Banks and Young Buck over contracts and loyalty.
Yes, demonstrating that managing relationships, even within his own crew that was built on loyalty, could be fraught with tension and public fallout. He's also engaged in public disputes or pointed exchanges with figures like Sean Diddy Combs, which is obviously very prominent right now, Cameron, Jay-Z, and Lil Wayne over the years. It is worth noting, however, that an earlier, quite bitter feud with Nas was eventually resolved, and they even collaborated on a track together in 2023, showing that some of these conflicts can eventually be overcome.
Going back to his early career, that controversial lyrical content itself created major problems for him, beyond just feuds.
Absolutely fundamental to his early struggles in his narrative. How to Rob in 1999 explicitly named and angered many powerful artists across the industry, instantly making him a target of resentment and putting him on notice. And Ghetto Crond, forgive me, as we discussed, detailing the activities of powerful drug dealers led directly to him being labeled a snitch, a deeply harmful and dangerous accusation within the street and hip-hop worlds, and is widely rumored in the sources to have been the primary catalyst for the near-fatal 2000 shooting.
His provocative nature led to other controversies later on, too.
It did. Things like a Canadian politician attempting to have him banned from entering Canada for a concert due to concerns about his lyrics and influence, though the concert eventually proceeded under heavy police supervision. And that protracted legal battle with singer Tierra Mary over the unauthorized posting of a sensitive image, which 50 Cent ultimately won legally, though the judgment against her contributed to his eventual bankruptcy filing due to complications in collecting.
So while some of these feuds undoubtedly involve genuine animosity, looking at the pattern over decades, many of them also seem incredibly strategic, don't they? Almost like performance art at times.
That is the key insight the sources really emphasize. While there was certainly real discord, real dislike in many of these conflicts, many can and probably should be viewed, at least in part, as strategic performance. They consistently generated massive media attention, kept his name constantly in headlines even when he didn't have new music or a movie coming out, and reinforced that confrontational, resilient, and seemingly unbeatable persona he had carefully cultivated.
And they often seem to coincide with new releases or ventures.
Very often, suggesting a calculated element of marketing and narrative control. He became a master at using conflict and controversy, whether real or manufactured or somewhere in between, to fuel his brand and maintain visibility. He blurred the lines between genuine personal or business disputes and deliberate strategic PR stunts, perhaps better than anyone.
His financial journey, despite the massive success of the music and Vitamin Water, also hit a major, very public challenge with a bankruptcy filing.
It did. In 2015, he filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The filings listed debts of around $36 million against assets valued at less than $20 million. This filing was partly precipitated by that large $7 million judgment against him in a lawsuit related to the unauthorized posting of a sex tape involving Rick Ross's ex-partner.
On the surface, filing for bankruptcy sounds like a major financial failure, especially for someone with his profile.
It could certainly be read that way, and it generated huge headlines. But the sources generally frame this a bit differently. The Chapter 11 filing appeared to be more of a strategic legal maneuver, a tool often used by sophisticated businesses and individuals to restructure his debts, protect his core assets from multiple lawsuits, and gain control over complex financial obligations.
And he emerged from it relatively quickly.
Yes, he emerged from bankruptcy relatively quickly and successfully. Notably, he paid back over $22 million to his creditors, ahead of the original 5-year plan outlined in the bankruptcy agreement.
How was he able to manage that repayment so effectively?
The repayment was facilitated, according to the sources, by about $8.7 million of his own funds, plus a significant $13.65 million he received from a settlement in a legal malpractice lawsuit he had filed against a former law firm. So this episode, while undoubtedly a significant legal and financial challenge, ultimately underscored his business flexibility, his ability to navigate complex financial and legal situations, and arguably, it even reinforced his image as a savvy operator who could bounce back even from major setbacks like bankruptcy.
Beyond the business battles and the public controversies, the sources also touch on a less publicized but consistent aspect of his life, his philanthropy.
Yes, he has shown a consistent commitment to giving back over the years, even if it doesn't generate the same headlines as the feuds. He established the G-Unity Foundation way back in 2003, early in his mainstream success.
And what's the focus of the foundation?
The foundation's focus is explicitly on improving the quality of life for low-income and underserved youth and communities, particularly those similar to the environment he himself grew up in. It supports programs that foster social and leadership skills, provide educational opportunities, and offer job training.
One notable initiative mentioned is the G-Unity Business Lab.
Yes. That program specifically provides students with opportunities to learn core business values and practical entrepreneurial skills by developing their own business ideas and receiving guidance and mentorship from local business leaders. It's a very direct translation of his own business acumen into a program designed to empower young people.
And he's extending these efforts to Shreveport now, too.
The sources mention he is actively extending the G-Unity Foundation's efforts to Shreveport, Louisiana, directly aligning his philanthropic activities with his significant business investments in the city. This philanthropic work, while less sensational than his feuds or nine-figure deals, contributes to a more well-rounded understanding of his impact and shows a clear commitment to reinvesting in communities similar to his own origin story. It softens that hard-edged public image somewhat.
And after decades in the spotlight across all these different fields, he's also received numerous formal awards and accolades beyond just sales figures.
He has accumulated quite a collection. While he has been nominated 14 times for Grammys, he has won 1 Grammy Award for Crack a Bottle, his collaboration with Eminem and Dr. back in 2010. He also holds 3 American Music Awards, 13 Billboard Music Awards, 3 BET Awards, among many others, across music, television, and entertainment throughout his career.
So bringing us right up to the present day, 2024, 2025, what does the landscape look like for Curtis 50 Cent Jackson now? Where is his focus?
He remains an incredibly dynamic force, constantly active across multiple sectors. It doesn't seem like he ever really slows down. His current focus, based on the sources, is clearly increasingly on television production through G-Unit Film and Television, strategic investments, particularly in areas like real estate, spirits, and now that production infrastructure, and actively building a lasting legacy.
Music is still part of the picture, but maybe not the central part it once was.
Exactly. While he releases solo albums much less frequently than during his peak years, he absolutely maintains a significant musical presence. He's not retired from music by any means, but it's clearly not the primary engine of his career or his income anymore.
What has his recent music activity looked like?
Well, no new solo studio album has been announced for this specific 2024-2025 period, according to the sources we reviewed. However, he remains very active through high-profile collaborations and selective single releases. In 2023, for instance, he featured on tracks like Nicki Minaj's Beep Beep and Nas's Office Hours, showing he's still working with top-tier artists.
And in 2024?
His 2024 activity included releasing his own singles like Guns and Smoke and Prayed Up, as well as features on tracks like Spiritual War with the late DMX and Uncle Murdaugh's Spin the Block. Looking ahead to 2025, he's even listed for a mixed version of his classic In Die Club, blended with Whoa! On a planned Super Bowl LIX hip-hop dance party DJ mix, showing his iconic hits remain culturally relevant.
And of course, his extensive back catalog continues to generate significant royalties year after year.
Precisely. His strategy in music now seems to be focused on maintaining relevance and visibility through these high-impact, selective engagements, rather than feeling the pressure to release prolific albums every couple of years. This aligns perfectly with his current status as a mogul whose primary income streams and strategic focus have decisively shifted towards television and his broader business ventures.
And speaking of those business ventures, the developments are heavily centered on the expansion of G-Unit Film and Television, particularly that Shreveport project.
That appears to be the major component right now. The significant investment in Shreveport, Louisiana is absolutely central to this phase. The G-Unit Studios facility he's controlling, and the newly leased Stageworks venue are key pieces of physical infrastructure for his growing media empire.
And he seems deeply personally invested in Shreveport, not just seeing it as a business location on a map.
The sources quote him expressing that Shreveport feels like home, and that he views these ventures explicitly as a legacy project. This indicates a deep personal commitment that seems to extend beyond just generating revenue or content. He's explicitly discussed plans for urban redevelopment and housing projects in the area, tying his business moves directly to potentially transformative community impact.
This strategy positions him to wield significant influence in shaping that city's future, while also fostering a narrative of urban revitalization directly tied to his personal brand.
Exactly. It could indeed serve as a potential model for other wealthy entertainers looking to make a tangible structural difference in specific communities, going beyond traditional philanthropy.
And Sire Spirits, his alcohol company with Brunson Cognac and Le Chemin du Roi Champagne, remains a core part of his business activities.
Yes, those brands appear to be key enterprises for him currently. And as we noted earlier, he's actively protecting those interests, demonstrated by the recent legal action against the former executive who allegedly defrauded the company. The G-Unit clothing line also continues to operate, primarily through online retail channels.
He's also been quite clear recently about his current financial mindset, hasn't he?
He has. He stated that his current financial focus is firmly on building long-term, sustainable wealth and maintaining financial security and control over his assets and ventures. He's less concerned, he says, with chasing speculative goals like achieving publicly declared billionaire status, and more focused on solidifying his existing empire and ensuring its longevity.
His social media presence continues to be a constant and often dominant factor in his public image and how he interacts with the world.
Highly active, highly strategic, and often highly controversial. In 2024-2025, he continues to utilize platforms like Instagram and X, formerly Twitter, extensively. It's for direct fan engagement, promoting his various ventures, offering commentary on current events, and of course his well-known penchant for trolling rivals and public figures.
His activity regarding Sean Diddy Combs' legal troubles has been particularly prominent and, as we noted, seems very strategic.
It has been almost daily commentary and updates throughout 2024 and into 2025, according to the sources. He's absolutely leveraged the massive public interest in that situation directly. As mentioned, the sources report he's producing that Netflix docuseries specifically chronicling Combs' alleged crimes and legal downfall.
It feels like a modern evolution of his early mixtape strategy.
That's a great way to put it. Bypassing traditional media gatekeepers, amplifying feuds and controversies to ensure constant conversation around his name, and keeping his brand highly visible and relevant in the cultural zeitgeist. He understands the attention economy incredibly well.
And despite the major shift in focus towards production and business, he's still very much an active live performer.
Absolutely. He continues to be scheduled for major concerts and tours. He's slated for a significant concert alongside Davido and Mary J. Blige at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London in July 2025. He also has several other international dates listed for June 2025 in places like Frankfurt, Germany, and at the Parklife Festival in Manchester, UK. He also recently completed a residency in Las Vegas in December 2024 and continues to make appearances at events and on television. His career isn't static. It's constantly evolving, performing, producing, investing, always moving.
So, wrapping up this deep dive into the life and career of Curtis 50 Cent Jackson, based purely on the sources we've examined today, it's truly a remarkable chronicle. It takes you from the profound hardship, the crime, the incarceration of South Jamaica, Queens,
through miraculously surviving 9 bullet wounds, achieving that unprecedented global music superstardom.
and then transforming again into this multifaceted entrepreneur and now a major media mogul.
It's an extraordinary testament to sheer resilience, adaptability, and an undeniable, almost innate entrepreneurial spirit.
At the absolute core of his enduring success across all these different fields, it seems to be his ability to adapt that hustler mentality, that code of resourcefulness, strategic thinking, and survival forged through his early experiences on the streets and apply it effectively to legitimate business and creative endeavors on a massive global scale.
And that near-fatal shooting in 2000,
Yeah.
it wasn't the end. Instead, it became the foundational narrative element. It symbolized invincibility, a sense of purpose, overcoming death itself, a narrative that resonated globally and made him seem almost larger than life.
That powerful narrative, combined with his raw talent, his distinct voice, and the absolutely crucial backing of Eminem and Dr. Dre, propelled him to the absolute forefront of hip-hop in the early 2000s. Albums like Get Rich or Die Tryin and The Massacre weren't just successful, they were cultural events that defined an era of gritty realism delivered with polished, high-budget production.
But his ambition quickly, clearly expanded beyond just the music charts. That strategic move into business, particularly the foresight shown in negotiating an equity stake in Vitamin Water rather than just a standard endorsement fee, was such a clear sign of his financial acumen and his long-term vision for wealth creation.
And that foresight continued to guide him through subsequent ventures in apparel, electronics, premium spirits, literature, even video games. And most significantly, perhaps, his pivot to film and television production with G-Unit Film and Television, anchored by the massive success of the Power universe, has firmly established him as a major player, a mogul in Hollywood and the broader media landscape.
The 50 Cent brand itself has become this incredibly powerful, adaptable entity, defined by unapologetic self-assertion, resilience, and this uncanny ability to remain relevant and central to the conversation across decades.
He's achieved this through constant strategic adaptation, mastering social media for direct engagement, commentary, and yes, controversial trolling, making bold, potentially legacy-defining investments like the studio complex and community initiatives in Shreveport, and continuously finding new avenues to apply his core strengths and narrative.
His career really provides a compelling blueprint for sustained relevance in a volatile, rapidly changing entertainment and business industry. It underscores the importance of building an authentic core brand rooted in a compelling personal narrative.
Diversifying aggressively into new fields beyond your initial success.
Strategically leveraging media attention, including controversy when necessary.
And continuously adapting to shifting economic and cultural landscapes. He never seems to stand still.
He has effectively redefined the metrics of success for a celebrity figure in the 21st century. His impact and his wins are measured not just by music chart positions anymore, but by television ratings, business valuations, successful legal defenses of his enterprises, and increasingly, it seems, by community development initiatives. This ensures his influence continues and potentially grows, even as his direct musical output becomes more selective.
Ultimately, he's a unique cultural and entrepreneurial phenomenon, someone who took the profound hardships and dangers of his early life and transformed them into the raw material for his art and the unrelenting driving force for his immense ambition.
His journey, as detailed in these sources, from the streets of South Jamaica to becoming a global mogul, is just this complex, fascinating narrative of survival, strategic brilliance, and constant, relentless reinvention. He remains a truly unique and enduring figure in contemporary American culture.
And as we reflect on that entire journey, especially his current, very focused strategic push into building significant infrastructure in Shreveport, his own comments about it being a legacy project, and his public promise to over-deliver for the city, it really leaves you with a fascinating question to consider, doesn't it?
It does.
Given all this, how might 50 Cent's impact extend beyond just entertainment and business in the coming years? And could his actions in Shreveport potentially reshape perceptions of celebrity influence and responsibility in urban development and revitalization? Something to think about.
A significant thought indeed for you to ponder.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.